I'm challenging producers of equipment to really be mindful of producers' time. And I'm challenging the research side to help producers understand how to use this technology, how to apply it, and then do an economic analysis so producers don't invest heavily in stuff that may not be ready or may not pay off for them.
Swine it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Greiner, your host for today's Swine It podcast. And with me today, I have Dr. Tami Brown-Brandl, who is with the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. Good morning. How are you, Tami?
I'm doing really well.
Well, we're glad to have you on today, Tami. But before we get started, I think it'd be nice if you could give a little bit more of an introduction about yourself to the audience.
Yeah, so I'm Tami Brown-Brandl. I am a professor and splinter chair at the University of Nebraska in the Biological Systems Engineering Department. I've had a career that has spanned 25 years or so. 20 years was at the Meat Animal Research Center looking at swine and cattle heat production and then moving into precision animal management. About 4.5 years ago, I was recruited to the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, where I have endowed chair in looking at specifically precision animal management. Mostly my work is in swine, although I do have some poultry work and some beef cattle work.
We have a time and labor-saving product for you. AgriSlats by Healthy Farms is your solution. No more lugging jugs around the barn every month. With AgriSlats, you simply drop the slat through the floor twice a year, and it works to break down solids, reduces crusting and forming. To learn more, visit myhealthyfarms.com.
Very good. Well, thank you for that introduction. One of the things that I think is really interesting, certainly recently just went to World Pork Expo, and as I walk through the building, we see a lot of technology at hand. Talking about technology isn't anything new. We've been talking about it for years. But as we continue to address the labor issues and the need for additional things to help train people who don't maybe have the historical experience working with animals or with swine in particular, technology really does have a place and a fit into our industry today. And so with your experience, I'd really like to just start talking a little bit about different phases of production and how we can start to incorporate that technology into those phases based on what you have seen and conducted to kind of help our producers figure out what might be good fits for them.
In swine, well, in all livestock species, we really have to focus on the needs of the producers and the needs of the animal at each different stage. And each different stage has, of course, different needs, right? So if we look at gestation, let's start there, and then we'll kind of move ourselves through the different phases of production. As we move from gestation crates into group housing, we are losing a lot of the manual precision animal management that producers can do. They know where that animal is located by location. They know when she was bred. They can walk by and know if she has eaten. They can walk by and notice that she hasn't eaten for the last 3 days. She might be losing a little bit of condition. They can check to make sure she is still pregnant. As we move from those stalls into group housing, we are losing some of those tools or taking away some of those things that producers can do, because now we put them in a group of 20 to a group of 250, and that becomes very difficult to know if she's eaten, if she's losing weight, if she is still pregnant, because you're taking away all the tools that a producer has been using, right? And we need to fill in some of those gaps with technology. Some of those technologies are available, like electronic sow feeding systems, right? We can feed that sow a certain amount of feed based on her RFID tag, and we can tell if she's pregnant if they have a bore station. However, not all ESF systems have those, and some of the group housing systems don't have a way to record feed intake, right, or control feed intake. The things that are lacking in those systems, even today, even with the most advanced ESF system, is we might be able to weigh a pig, but we have no, in that weight, we can see if she's gaining weight or she's losing weight. The problem is we don't know how many piglets she's pregnant with. We don't know how much weight she should be gaining. So maybe a better way to do that is do condition score. However, there's no commercially available condition score system out there. There are several people working on that using cameras, and then being able to look at that fat condition in the back. It might not be as simple as one would think it would be from a camera, but I know several different groups are working on that. With condition score, then we can then start adjusting how much feed that she needs to consume. So if we see that she's losing condition, we can then adjust that ESF system or automate that adjustment so she can get a little bit more feed. Or if we see that she's gaining too much weight, we could then, or too much condition, then we can start reducing that feed there. But those systems just don't exist today. So those are some of the things that we're working on. Another thing that I think is really important to work on is illness detection, and that goes across all different production phases. Right today, the only way we know if an animal is sick is by the experience and the eyes and the ears of the animal caretaker. And as you know, our animal caretakers today don't have the experience or the longevity that our animal caretakers had, say, 20 or 30 years ago. 20 or 30 years ago, maybe even 40 years ago, those were people that grew up on a farm. They knew what to look for. They've had years and years of experience. Today, we don't find animal caretakers with that much experience. And so being able to select a pig that needs treatment isn't something that can be taught in a 30-minute video. Welcome to my swine farm, right? It does take time to learn how to do that. So when we start moving into farrowing, I think we're going to see some big changes with farrowing crates. And I don't think we are prepared as researchers, or especially as industry, to go from from farrowing stalls into loose farrowing. I know Minnesota is doing quite a bit of work, but that's a tough topic. Farrowing crates are necessary right now, and so it might be multi-phase problem that we need to handle, from selecting of animals that can handle those loose housing situations to designing or selecting different loose housing systems for sows. I do think it's coming. Hopefully it's not coming so soon, because we need to do a little bit more work to help producers select those systems. Then these are just brief overviews, and then when we go to finishing, and I have a lot of projects right now in finishing, once again, we rely on our animal caretakers to select animals that are sick based on their eyes. And if they have a pen of, say, 12 to 15 animals, it's really easy to make sure you've looked at every animal. When we have a pen of 200 animals, it's very hard to know that you've looked at all 200 animals, right? And you know that you know that the animals that are sick will hide and not present those behaviors or those symptoms when a person first walks in the barn. And that makes it really difficult and challenging, even for the most experienced animal caretaker, right? So the other thing that we rely solely on our animal caretakers to do is to select different cuts of animals that need to go to slaughter. And very rarely is there a scale in the barn to do that with. So right now there's some technologies out there that can grab a weight of a pig. There's a couple different ones. There's ones that have walk-through scales, and so you can tell if the size or weight of a pig as they walk through. Those systems are costly and they aren't used a lot in commercial settings. So the other ones are camera-based weights, and they, without an identification, you get an average weight of the animals coming to a drinker station. You don't know who's coming to the drinker station. So I think we have some work to do there, especially as we have producers and animal caretakers that don't have 30 years of experience to rely on. We are working on different systems that use RFID to identify the animal and then capture a picture and then determine weight from an image. The problem is that a lot of producers don't have RFID systems or RFID tags in a pig because they cost about $2 a piece. So I don't think we have perfect solutions today. We are working on better solutions, but I think technology is one of those areas of research that we really need a continuous collaboration with producers and researchers and industry and the technology industry, so we can test out different things research-wise, give that over to companies to fully develop systems, and then producers can implement them. But it's a circular thing because we can research a lot of stuff, but if we don't have a back and forth with industry, we might select a system that producers go, I can't use this. So it needs to be a continuous improvement and a continuous collaboration amongst all three groups.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think that's something that we've seen even in some of the testing that we've done over the years as well. Is there's always things that we find once we get it into the barn, whether it's even just how the pig interacts with the equipment or how the equipment behaves in that type of an environment, particularly, not just within a day, but over months or even a year. All of that information is important for producers to share back to help people develop better technology as we go through time. So I have a handful of questions. You covered a lot of topics there, and I'm going to jump back a little bit and work through them. One of the questions I have is really around gestation. You alluded to, of course, using ESFs and other types of systems when we think about group housing, and certainly Prop 12 is on a lot of people's mind in the United States and having the ability to do that. One of the things I used to hear a lot in production, and it's kind of maybe a silly thing, but yet one that really intrigues me, and we've seen systems over the years, but it's really around heat detection and opportunities to identify when animals are in heat. And we've seen very simple ones of, a bore on one side of a panel and the frequency in which the sow comes up to the bore gets marked, and then that's in heat. But is there anything coming up on that side of the technology with gestation and heat detection that we should be thinking about?
I don't know of anything in that area. The bore stations are one way you can do that. However, a lot of ESF systems don't have bore stations, and that's another animal that you have to maintain, and that's an animal that is by itself. And so maybe we have some animal well-being concerns with pigs being very social. So I see some reasons that we need to consider different options. Um, but that's not an area that I've really worked in, and I don't know of anybody that is working in that. So maybe that's one thing that we should bring up and do some conversations with producers and with researchers and see if we can come up with some good ideas on how to do that.
I'm curious on your body condition detection. So you were talking a little bit about that and utilizing cameras to detect body condition. Is that something that you see that each production system or farmer can set their image of what ideal body condition will be, or do you think that's going to be kind of a fixed image across the system and say, or that technology piece, and say this is where the industry is going to have to be to make the cameras work?
That's one of those conversations that we need to have, and I think we need to include genetic companies in that conversation, right? Because I think different sows and different genetic lines have a more ideal condition score or a different ideal condition score than other genetic lines. If you have a really short, stocky sow, she might appear to be fat or in higher condition than a long, sort of skinny sow. So I think those are those are some of the things that I think we need to work on. But no, I don't think we should dictate a certain condition or a certain ideal condition for every single genetic line of pig. And maybe producers like them a little, maybe they have found have a little bit more condition, those sows might have longer longevity, or having a little less condition might give them more piglets. So those are things that I think we need to continue to work on. Condition score is not an easy thing in sows. It's easier in dairy cows. They've done a lot with dairy cows. And in sows, we've just started playing with that, and we've got some research dollars that we're going to continue to do that work. But it is not a particularly easy thing to do in a sow.
No, it's a very difficult process to go through. And I appreciate your comments around genetics, and even within farms, similar genetics across different farms, different environments are all going to have different body condition needs. That is not going to be a one size fits all kind of program. So that is good.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
One of the other things I guess I didn't hear much conversation on when you were talking, and it really goes across all three phases, would be lameness detection. And you talked about illness, but are there, and we've seen like the cameras that can help you pick out gilts based on their walking gait, but are there any other technologies coming down the pipeline to help us with lameness?
Yeah, we've also been working in lameness, and the Meat Hour Research Center has been working in lameness, and I know like PIC and Benny Moat are also kind of looking at sow structure, which is an important component to lameness. We have to have a correctly structured animal in order to avoid that. Some of the things that we have been looking at is looking at how the animal walks and being able to pick up. You can do it with stride length. We do it with number of steps in a short distance. Right now where we are technology wise is we have to have the sow walking a distance, and if you put a sow in a hallway, you can get that sow to move at kind of a regular pace, whether she is lame or whether she is a healthy sow, or even a finishing pig, right? So as long as you have a straight hallway, you can walk them down there. We can use technology to do that. When we put them out in the pen, we're going to have to go away from cameras, I think, because we've even looked at trying to look at like 2 to 4 or 2 to 7 still images and trying to look at how that sow is walking. Because when they're in an ESS system or in a pen of finishing pigs, you don't have a long straight hallway. And even some of the ESF systems that have that long straight, that alleyway after they come out of the feeder, pigs, and they don't walk at a certain rate. You have pigs that will run through there, and then you'll have pigs that dawdle and smell the floor and just be pigs. And so in order to get those lameness, we really have to, the current technology is you have to have kind of a length of hallway or a length of walking at kind of a regular pace in order to be able to pick that up. It's very difficult if you don't have that. So in order to do lameness detection, we might have to go to a wearable. I know Eric Pasota did some work, and he did cameras, and he was able to track pigs around using, and that was in open pens of finishing pigs or young gilts. And they were able to detect when an animal wasn't moving as much. So we might be able to put that into a wearable and be able to look at, like, do an accelerometer on an ear tag and be able to see how much that pig is moving around and be able to pick out that. The nice thing with the camera technology is you can actually pinpoint the leg that is affected. If you do an accelerometer, maybe you could do front and back. I don't know, because I haven't tried that yet, but that might be something we could do. But there's going to be a lot of research that needs to happen in order to be able to pick out anything more than level of activity.
Yeah, I think that was one of my questions, and we hear that a lot, at least in the U.S., is the camera technology, and I know it's getting better, but ceiling height in a lot of our barns has been limiting in the past for ability to predict body weights and so forth. And so it sounds like that is getting better. The idea of the wearables becomes even more appealing, because if you can connect that with an RFID, it ties some of this other technology together. So I think that's actually interesting to hear how some of the technology might be changing already.
Yeah. Pigs are fun animals and difficult animals to put wearables on. Mm-hmm. Because they're very, very curious. Unlike cattle, where you could put a wearable you could put a sensor on a collar, you could put a sensor in an ear tag, and while another animal might lick on it or pull on it a little bit, they're not going to destroy it. But when you put a wearable on a pig, immediately you capture the attention of all the other animals on the pen. And if it's different or new, the first thing they want to do is taste it and chew on it. And chewing on a wearable is not advised. And wearables, the other thing that has to happen is we do need cheaper systems on the wearable side. We did some active RFID a long time ago. That was about $40 a tag. That is completely unreasonable for the swine industry. Even a $2 tag is an expensive endeavor. And also we need to figure out if a producer is willing to put a hole in the pig's ear, because that has been kind of the hang up with a lot of RFID tags in finishing pigs, is because they don't want that hole in the ear because it decreases the value of the ear. So,
yeah, it's a very good point. One of the other questions I had in our conversation is you were talking a little bit about loose farrowing, and I was curious, what kinds of technology do you see coming into play with loose farrowing. I mean, I can immediately see camera technology for identifying, piglets that might be sick and doing some of that, besides just standard, how much is mom eating kind of technology. So are there any other technologies that you see coming into that space?
So the other thing that we have been doing is we've also been using depth camera technology in the farrowing crate, and we've taken it more on the side of evaluating how the different farrowing crates, standard farrowing crates, are influencing sow behavior and sow posture transitions, and where piglets are staying and where we place the heat lamps. So those are kind of the technologies or the reasons that we've been using those cameras. I know there are some people out there that are looking at technologies to determine if a piglet's being laid on, and maybe to prevent that, because we have a high pre-weaning mortality. If we go to loose farrowing, we're going to have even a higher pre-weaning mortality, I'm afraid. And when we were so I was able to go to Eurotier, which is a very large animal equipment manufacturer show, and it's held every other year in Germany. And we were able to go there and walk around and see the different technologies coming out of different things that people are seeing, or at least companies are trying out. And one of the things that we saw that was very intriguing to me was a place where the sow is standing when she goes to stand up, and they're determining that with a camera or a proximity sensor. When she starts to stand up, the whole floor where she's standing raises up, I don't know, about 10 inches, maybe a little less than that. So that has some nice things, because then that would hold the piglets away from her, at least try to hold the piglets away from her until she goes to lay down. And then once she lays down, the whole system then comes down. Always when you have moving parts and you put them in an animal environment, I say if you have moving parts, you have a maintenance. And when you have maintenance, you increase your labor. So we have to be careful of those and make sure that they're really ready for prime time before we start recommending them for producers. But I would be intrigued to try those out and see. And and they showed them in loose housing. I'm not sure how that would work in loose housing unless you constrain the sow to the standard farrowing stall size, right? So somehow you have to be able to restrain her so she doesn't accidentally step off of that raised platform. So, but some of the interesting technologies coming up, I don't know. I think we have to do more work on those still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes those create new thoughts, and that's what you need, right? Is that it may not be practical where it is, but it might stimulate somebody else to think about something a little bit differently, and you find this new marriage of technology. So,
absolutely,
that's awesome.
It's time for our famous three. A worldwide leader in animal nutrition, Adiseo's portfolio of products includes methionine, the full range of vitamins, enzymes, organic selenium, probiotics, mycotoxin management strategies, and palatability products. With such a diverse offering, Adiseo supports its customers with a broad range of expertise, tools, and services to help them maintain a competitive advantage. Adiseo, fueling predictable profits. To learn more, visit Adiseo at www.adiseo.com.
Well, Tami, I do see that our time is wrapping up, and it's certainly been fun. And I know we could have talked a lot longer, especially about some of the new technology that's coming up. But for our listeners today, could you provide a couple of key takeaway points that you'd like for them to be thinking about when it comes to precision technology and using that within their barns?
So I really think we have to show producers that there is some value in the technology before they invest a lot. The technology, and I'm going to challenge technology producers that if we put cameras in the barn, we have to make sure that it's not causing extra maintenance to go and clean those cameras. If we put moving parts, that they are easily maintained, so the producer isn't spending all their time maintaining a system instead of watching animals. So I'm challenging producers of equipment to really be mindful of producers' time. And I'm challenging the research side to help producers understand how to use this technology, how to apply it, and then do an economic analysis so producers don't invest heavily in stuff that may not be ready or may not pay off for them. So I'm challenging more, not the producers, but the technology and researchers to ensure technology is ready for them to go.
Very good. Well, one of the things we like to ask our guest speakers are a few questions. The first question I'd like to ask is, if people are interested in understanding more about the technology or precision ag in general, are there any resources that you would recommend to them?
Yeah, so I've been attending a conference for probably the last 15 years, and it's European Conference on Precision Livestock Farming, or ECPLF. Europe is ahead of us in this field. We just recently had our second US PLF conference in Knoxville, Tennessee. The next one will be in Lincoln in May of 2025. And we would really like more producers to come to those meetings because, like I said earlier, we really have to have a continuous flow of information from researchers to equipment manufacturers to farmers, and it has to be a continuous flow back and forth. So we make sure that we answer the questions producers have, and that producers understand the use of and the limitations of the technology that is currently existing.
Very good. Is there a book that you're reading today that's not related to pigs that you would recommend to our listeners?
I read a lot of books. One book that I really like that I think that most engineers and people working with technology should read, and it's called Meltdown: Why Our Systems Fail. And it goes into a lot of reasons why systems fail and how to avoid pitfalls. And it goes into diversity of developmental teams, like why you want a diverse team, to having a closely coupled system like we've seen in the airline industries today, where it's so tightly coupled, meaning there isn't any room for failures to happen without bigger problems happening. So those are called tightly coupled systems. So it talks about those, and it also talks about how people fear change and don't want to listen to reasonable solutions at some points in time. So it talks about those pitfalls as well. It's a short read book. I listen to Audible all the time. So that's one of those Audible books that I listened to and was really, really pleased with.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So Meltdown is what you said.
Meltdown: Why Our Systems Fail.
Okay, perfect. The last question I have for you is kind of, well, you don't have to name anybody. Let's just put it that way. So I'm asking if you could think of somebody in your life that you define as successful. What's a trait that they possess that's allowed them to be successful?
So I can give you several names, but I think one trait that I think is very valuable is to have the freedom to imagine what could be. And I think that's very important. And the other trait is not to get stuck in one train of thought. I think a lot of times we think animal production has to be exactly this because this is what we've always done, or this is what everybody is doing. I think especially as researchers, we cannot get stuck in that train of thought, and we have to be willing to listen to people that we disagree with. Because I think it's very important to understand those perspectives, because there might be value in those perspectives, even though it's really sometimes hard to listen to. And what I'm thinking about is animal rights activists or vegans, but we really have to take a step back and we have to listen intently on what they're saying, to make sure that we understand their perspective, because some of what they're saying could actually really help us out. So I think having an open mind and imagining a future of animal production that doesn't exist today is where we need to be, and it will serve us well.
Yeah, it's definitely being creative is something we all need to be thinking about, and keeping that open mind as people talk to allow us to create in our minds is important.
Yeah, one of the things that I like to end my talks with is, how do you imagine, and it can be swine or dairy or beef production, will look like in, say, 20 years or 50 years? And in order for us to control that narrative, we need to know where we're headed. We can't just be okay with what's happening today. We have to be able to know where we want to be in 20 or 50 years and start moving the research in that way, and then we can start moving technology in that way, and then we can start implementing that in production systems. So I think that's important, and I like to encourage students when I'm talking to students. I always say, so who is going to define our future? And it is veterinarians, engineers, animal scientists, and producers, right? And computer scientists, it's a very fun world to live in today, because we're seeing lots and lots of technologies coming up and lots of things that we can do to improve it. But we have to be the drivers of that, not legislation or animal rights or those kind of. So if we imagine that, we can control that narrative better.
Very good. Well, Tami, I want to thank you again for your time today. It's been a pleasure visiting with you and sharing and listening to your conversations around precision ag. For our listeners, again, this is Dr. Tami Brown-Brandl with University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you.